Good morning, 5th grade. Today we're going to read Hatchet Chapter 9. We're really excited that today is Friday, so let's keep it moving. Get ready for your warm-up. It says, a porcupine entered Brian's shelter while he was asleep. Brian got stuck by the porcupine. His leg was in pain. The mosquitoes were biting him, and he did not have a fire to keep him warm. He was overwhelmed with self-pity. He cried. Later, he realized that he broke the most important rule for survival. Feeling sorry for yourself does not work. Brian had two dreams, one about his father and one about Terry, his friend. The dreams helped him figure out how to make fire from the hatchet. Press pause to write down your fill-in-the-blank words and play when you're ready for the focus question and vocabulary. The focus question says, how does Brian respond to challenge? What themes do his responses reveal? We have three vocabulary words. Kindling, that's like small sticks or twigs that you use to start a fire. Sputtered, that's when, it's kind of like when your car is trying to start, but it won't. It has to typically when something is being heated, it's like you're trying to get the fire going, but it's sputtering, like it's not, the fire's not catching. And then the last one is ignite. That is when something catches fire. All right, open up your book to Chapter 9, and as we're reading the first couple of pages, we're going to use our CSPS strategy. We can probably already answer questions 1 and 2, but let's just make sure the setting hasn't changed. Brian found it was a long way from sparks to fire. Clearly, there had to be something for the sparks to ignite, some kind of tinder kindling. But what? He brought some dry grass in, tapped sparks into it, and watched them die. He tried small twigs, breaking them into little pieces, but that was worse than the grass. Then he tried a combination of the two, grass and twigs. Nothing. He had no trouble getting sparks, but the tiny bits of hot stone or metal, he couldn't tell which they were, just sputtered and died. All right, we'll stop right there when we describe Brian and what he's doing. Brian is trying to make fire by striking his hatchet against a rock to create sparks. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. All right, and we can use this quote from that second paragraph in Chapter 9. Press pause to write down the quote and play when you're ready for the setting. We know that Brian is in the Canadian wilderness, alone. Brian is alone in the Canadian wilderness. And our quote, we could say this part about how he brought some dry grass in, because that gives us a clue that he's in the wilderness. All right. And let's keep going to find the problem. He needed something finer, something soft and fine and fluffy to catch the bits of fire. Shredded paper would be nice, but he had no paper. So close, he said aloud, so close. He put the hatchet back in his belt and went out of the shelter, limping on his sore leg. There had to be something, had to be. Man had made fire. There had been fire for thousands, millions of years. There had to be a way. He dug into his pockets and found the $20 bill in his wallet. Paper. Worthless paper out here. But if he could get a fire going, He ripped the 20 into tiny pieces, made a pile of pieces, and hit sparks into them. Nothing happened. They just wouldn't take the sparks. But there had to be a way, some way to do it. Not 20 feet from his right, leaning out over the water, were birches. He stood, looked at them for a full half-minute before they registered in his mind. They were beautiful, white with bark, like clean, slightly speckled paper. Paper. He moved to the trees. All right, we'll stop right there. We're describing the problem and the challenging situation that Brian is dealing with. We know that Brian is trying to make fire, and he uses different materials, but he's still unable to make fire. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And we can use a quote from this paragraph up here, where it says there had to be something, had to be, man had made fire. Right? This lets us know that he hasn't made fire yet, but he's going to keep looking until he finds something that will. Press pause to write down the quote and play when you're ready to keep going to find the solution. We're at, he moved to the trees. Where the bark was peeling from the trunks, it lifted its tiny tendrils, almost fluffs. Brian plucked some of them loose, rolled them in his fingers. They seemed flammable, dry, and nearly powdery. He pulled and twisted bits off the trees, packing them in one hand while he picked them with the other, picking and gathering until he had a wad close the size of a baseball. Then he went back into the shelter and arranged the ball of birch bark peelings at the base of the black rock. As an afterthought, he threw in the remains of the $20 bill. He struck, and a stream of sparks fell into the bark and quickly died. But this time one spark fell on one small hair of dry bark, almost a thread of bark, and seemed to glow a bit brighter before it died. Material had to be finer. There had to be a soft and incredibly fine nest for the sparks. I must make a home for the sparks, he thought. A perfect home, or they won't stay. They won't make fire. He started ripping the bark, using his fingernails at first, and when that didn't work, he used the sharp edge of the hatchet, cutting the bark into thin slivers, hairs so fine they were almost not there. It was painstaking work, slow work, and he stayed with it for over 2 hours. Twice he stopped for a handful of berries, and once to go to the lake for a drink, then back to work, the sun on his back, until at last he had a ball of fluff as big as a grapefruit, dry birch bark fluff. He positioned his bark nest, as he thought of it, at the base of the rock, used his thumb to make a small depression in the middle, and slammed the back of the hatchet down across the black rock. A cloud of sparks rained down, most of them missing the nest, but some, perhaps 30 or so, hitting in the depression of those 6 or 7, found fuel, and grew, smoldered, and caused the bark to take on a red glow. Then they went out. Close! He was so close! He repositioned the nest, made a new and smaller dent with his thumb, and struck again. More sparks, a slight glow, then nothing. It's me, he thought. I'm doing something wrong. I don't know this. A cave dweller would have made fire by now. A Cro-Magnon man would have had a fire by now. But I don't know this. I don't know how to make fire. Maybe not enough sparks. He settled the nest in place once more and hit the rock with a series of blows as fast as he could. The sparks flowed like a golden waterfall. At first they seemed to take. There were several, many sparks that found life and took briefly, but they all died, starved. He leaned back. They are like me. They are starving. It wasn't quantity. There were plenty of sparks, but they needed more. I would kill, he thought suddenly, for a book of matches. Just one book, just one match. I would kill. What makes fire? He thought back to school, to all those science classes. Had he ever learned what made a fire? Did a teacher ever stand up and say, "This is what makes a fire"? He shook his head, tried to focus his thoughts. What did it take? You have to have fuel, he thought, and he had that. The bark was fuel. Oxygen. There had to be air. He needed to add air. He had to fan it, blow on it. He made the nest ready again, held the hatchet backwards, tensed, and struck 4 quick blows. Sparks came down, and he leaned forward and as fast as he could and blew. Too hard. Man. There was a bright, almost intense glow, and then it was gone. He had blown it out. Another set of strikes, more sparks. He leaned and blew, but gently this time, holding back and aiming the stream of air from his mouth to hit the brightest spot. 5 or 6 sparks had fallen into the tight mass of bark hair, and Brian centered his efforts there. The sparks grew with his gentle breath. The red glow moved from the sparks themselves into the bark, moved and grew and became worms, glowing red worms that crawled up the bark hairs and caught other threads of bark and grew until there was a pocket of red as big as a quarter, a glowing red coal of heat. And when he ran out of breath and paused to inhale, the red ball suddenly burst into flame. "Fire!" he yelled. "I've got fire! I've got it! I've got it! I've got it!" We'll stop right there. Box number 4, how does Brian try to solve his problem? And we know that after using several materials as fuel, he realized that his fire also needed oxygen. And when he blew gently on the sparks, he was able to get fire. And we have 2 quotes that we can underline. Silently write the solution in box 4 in one of the quotes. And when you're finished, you have time to answer the focus question. How does Brian respond to challenge? What themes do his responses reveal?